Okay, good afternoon. Bernard Green, Chair of the Brookline Select Board Committee on Policing Reform, and this is our meeting of November 18, 2020. Let's start off with approving the minutes of 3 meetings, September 23rd, October 7, October 21, and November 4th. If people had an opportunity to review those, any objections to approving them? I think we have to add a few things in there, but subject to editing, or not editing, but completing by adding, I think, reports. People willing to approve them? All in favor? Okay. That looks, Mr. Yee? And I assume Casey, you
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so those are approved. Good. Next, I think it's Casey or maybe someone else suggested that we have educational presentations before each meeting, no more than 10 or 15 minutes. So this week, I asked, since this is such a hot issue, I asked Jennifer Pastor, and I think she has a couple other people, to talk about the school resource officers. And in the packet, there are two fact sheets on school resource officers and the walk and talk program. Plus in that packet is the MOU for the school resource officers. So that those are intended to be background. Sometimes people, criticize them for being the position of the police department and therefore biased. Of course it is, but this gives us some information from which we can work from and critique if necessary. But any rate, so I'd like to, before we start, I'd like to just introduce someone, Caitlin Starr, who is the designee of the Diversity Commission to the committee. Caitlin is the Assistant Diversity Officer of the town, and incredibly efficient and helpful person. Hopefully she'll bring back to this committee some concerns or issues that the Diversity Commission has stated to her. So I see Marty's here. So let's get started. Jen, you have no more than 15 minutes. We're on a tight schedule because town meeting is breathing down our neck.
Well, I'm pretty confident. I don't think ever in my history of public speaking have I ever used more time than I've been allotted. It's not not my favorite thing to do. But so for those of you I have not met, my name is Jennifer Pastor. I'm a lieutenant in the Brookline Police Department, and I oversee our crisis intervention team. And I'm a lieutenant within the Community Service Division. So as part of my duties and responsibilities, I do oversee the SROs. My understanding about tonight's presentation was that we were going to veer off a little bit away from the work that our SROs are doing in the younger schools, and not to talk specifically about Caitlin Keneally and her role up there as the SRO at the high school, but to introduce you to the members of our juvenile unit, specifically Sergeant Chuck Thornton and Dorian Gallagher, who is our violence prevention coordinator, who works extensively at Brookline High School, and for them to really get into the details of the work that they do within the detective division, within our juvenile unit, and within the violence prevention arena. So I will let the experts speak on that and turn it over to them.
Okay, I'll start. My name is Chuck Thorne. I'm a detective sergeant here at the Brookline Police, and part of my duties is working with juveniles. And I was asked what I'm like to talk about is maybe what we do specifically in the high school in terms of what we talk about at the round table and some of our diversionary programs which we have. I'll start with the high school. So once a week we meet at Brookline High School, and with it's me, Detective Julia McDonald, who's also a detective in the juvenile unit. School resource officers usually have Officer Keneally is there, and Officer Stevenson, and he works in the community service division as well. We meet with the deans and program coordinators at the high school, and it's usually a group of about 10 to 15. And also Dorian Gallagher, I'm sorry, she's also there, and she's going to talk too. Some of the things we talk about, it's everything there is confidential. So we can obviously can't get into specifics, but in general, what we talk about, I got a list of things that, most importantly, I think is the safety of the kids in the community and the school. If the police learn about threats off school hours, threats to the students threatening other students threatening staff, and even more serious things, bomb threats to the school or just threats in general, we'll discuss. And that's not something we'll wait weekly to discuss, but I have the phone number of the headmaster and the deans, and we coordinate that way 24/7. But something we talk about in general, even sometimes a student might have, it'll come to our attention or maybe staff's attention, some concerning social media posts that's brought to their attention, and we can address those and share that information. If a social media, sometimes we'll get threats or before they become something more serious, they might be on a student's social media page, and we'll get those concerns. And in general, anything, off hours involving students that's serious, serious crimes, felonies, or anything else that might lead to the diversionary program, which we'll talk about after that, we'll share with staff. And that's part of that MOU that we have signed with the school department and sharing information. Often we'll talk about, there are students that have been no trespass from the high school. They might be ex-students. They might be students who had graduated that are still coming back on campus, and they may or may not be in criminal activity, but at some point, they need to move on. There are other students that are not from Brookline that have come onto campus and sometimes have committed crimes as well. And so we share information of who's trespassing on the school grounds, who to look for, who not to look for. Students sometimes will come back if they're expelled and trespassed, and they'll come back in. They'll share that information with the police as well. School reports, this is a state statute. If there's weapons on campus, any serious weapons, the school has to report that to the police department in the town. That's a state law. And we usually would get involved in that anyway, in terms of a criminal investigation. Oftentimes we might have students that have restraining orders against other students or harassment prevention orders, and they might be either involved in relationships or they had just gone to Brookline court on their own and gotten a restraining order. And the school and the police department might sometimes need to work on a safety plan for those kids if there's dangers involved, or depending on the situation of each restraining order. The school has safety plans that they divide to, it basically says where students can be, where they can't be, how separating classes, that kind of thing. That's more on the school end than our end, but at least we would have to share that information if there's a danger. Restraining orders in the schools, we would have to share with them. I talked about social media threats involving crimes. Oftentimes school staff will get information on social media that they might not know where it's from or where it's coming from. And we can have the power to subpoena some records through the district attorney's office or get a search warrant if it's a crime. If we have probable cause that a crime occurred, we can get search warrants and subpoena records on that. And sometimes we're just kind of assist school staff on those type of issues. Oftentimes we'll get contact from another police department or the Department of Youth Services or Brookline Probation or another probation department that a certain student has a warrant. It's our job it's another, again, a state law. The police department has to bring that kid into the court, and we don't usually just kind of keep the school where we'll ask if the kid is in school. We haven't had a lot of, I don't think we've had one, I think, on school property arrest in the last 3 or 4 years. I have some more stats which I could get to later on those, but obviously we don't want to disrupt the school, and we always let the headmaster know if there is a serious, especially if the warrant's for something serious, we would let them know. Sometimes we'll talk about if there's a large scale event coming up, basketball game, football game, powder puff game, senior prank, things that they've had issues with in the past, or there might be a concerning issue if they want more police present. We talk about the details of those. Community service often assists in larger events like that. We also have, and this goes at the from K through 12, issues with parents and probate issues and custody issues. parental kidnapping cases. That's more at the lower level, but oftentimes we warn staff of a potential parent, a threat, kidnapping threat, that kind of issue as well. And those come up often in these meetings. I also do part of my job if there's a civil rights violation, and we get this occasionally, and this is again, sadly enough, at sometimes in the lower grades as well, where there's a civil rights violation or a threat or an assault, and it's bias, and it's a civil rights violation. I keep track of those, and that's for the entire town. So that's something we would discuss, raising the level of certain crimes. And that additionally, that'll go to the next thing, is where sometimes the teachers or the deans might not know whether or not something is a crime. There are certain things. Bullying becomes criminal harassment at some point. There might be a First Amendment issue with freedom of speech, where a student can say what they can say. And so sometimes we'll discuss that and whether or not we want to take action on those issues. Oftentimes the school will just let us know if there's a minor crime or incident they handle on their own, like a minor fight or a minor theft, a minor assault, maybe a trespass at night. They handle it on their own, and that's fine. And that goes back sometimes, especially the younger grades. I'll do that as well. If it's something that might be more serious crime for older students, if a younger student, third, fourth, fifth grade commits the same crime, I'll let the school handle some of those things. We don't need to bring some of those kids into criminal justice system at any level. So that's something that we let the schools handle a lot on their own. Which brings kind of me to the diversion program. So diversion program is kind of if there's a crime that had committed, and this is kind of the part where we have to, if we have probable cause, which basically is kind of the standard we have, if we know that, or we believe a kid is more likely than not to have committed a crime, to charge them with that crime. We don't bring them to the court. We might bring them in, we explain to them, and if this is like you watch the movies in a police interrogation, I would tell the kids everything we have. We're not going to hide things from them. We might tell them, this is what we have enough to charge you. If you want to agree to do something, divert this, we can talk about that. And Doreen can talk about some of the diversion levels we have. Some of them are pretty simple. If kids are caught with graffiti in town, they might clean up graffiti. If it's caught with drug and alcohol offenses, we have programs, and that's in the high school. They have their own program that Doreen can talk about. Sometimes if it involves a victim, even if it's a fight or minor shoplifting, sometimes the letter of apology, just kind of letting kids realize, how their actions affect other people. That can go down to, also to a restorative justice program, which Dorian can talk about. And a lot of time it's just parents, want to have, I get calls from parents all the time that said, can you just talk to them and tell them how serious this is and help me out? And then I'll ask the parent, what do you want to put on this contract with this kid? And the parents will tell me, can you put on a curfew? Can you put this on? And we'll put that on. We'll talk about that with the parents first. And so the diversion basically says if the kids do A, B, and C, we won't bring this to the first level, which would be a probable cause hearing in the court. After that, there's other levels. The district attorney's office also has several programs. They have all sorts of informational programs regarding violence prevention, alcohol and drug use, teen dating violence. And this is stuff that we have as well, and Dorian can talk to some of that. They also have this alternative to prosecution program where, similar to diversionary program, first time nonviolent offenses, they can divert them into other programs. So I think in general, what we've done, we looked into some stats back all the way to 2002 is when we kind of started keeping them, when I can look at our system, and from a 5-year period, and I think in the from 2005 to 2009, we had 114 charges for minor in possession of alcohol. From 2015 to 2019, we've had 9, and we haven't had any in the last year. In 2002, we had 107 juvenile arrests, and we've had 8 last year. And this year we have 4. A COVID year, there's not going to be as much. And if I look back, it looks like about 5% or less of juveniles were diverted away from the court system in 2002. And in 2016, we had about 25%. The later years, a lot of warrant arrests and just low numbers kind of didn't really give a good statistic on diverted numbers since 2016, but 2015, 2016, it's about 25%, which I think is a good number.
Okay.
So I
don't mean to cut you off, but we do have town meeting breathing down our neck. Can we move on to Doreen? And the statistics you mentioned, could you provide those to us? Because I don't think that they are as complete in our fact sheet as what you've laid out. So.
I can do that.
Okay, great. So Doreen,
am I on?
you have the floor. Yes, you are.
And I have probably what I assume 5 minutes.
That's a good assumption. I think we
Okay.
can work with that.
First of all, thank you for inviting us. It's a privilege. My name is Dorian Gallagher. I work with the Brookline Police Department, Brookline Public Schools, the Brookline Court, families, and anybody who needs access and information dealing with incidents involving juveniles and families. I am proud to say, and in some ways, I don't know if this is a good thing, but I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't know if I'm crazy or if I still love my job, but I'm going to go with the latter of the two. I have seen firsthand, I'm probably the longest standing member of the roundtable group, and I have seen firsthand how well it works with the police, the school, the court, in the best interest of juveniles and families. We have spent numerous hours, and it's hard to even put it in numbers, the number of time that committee or group has worked together to prevent future incidents, to preserve people's records so that they're not having any criminal activity on their name. And we work together day in and day out. Sergeant Thornton highlighted several different incidents that may occur, from substance abuse to assault, to sexual assaults, to domestic violence, teen dating violence. And what do we do with those cases? We sit down as a group, or sometimes it could be 3 people, it could be 8 people, and we really decipher what is the best for that child and family. And it could be referring to the substance abuse program at Brookline High School with the coordinator, Mary Minot, where they would have to attend sessions, to the hope that they would refrain from alcohol and to make better choices. We have cases of teen dating violence. I hate to say that kids are dating in 7th grade and even have boyfriends, and we've even had restraining orders in place as young as 8th grade, 9th grade, involving parents. What I really think is impressive is the counseling that is provided at the high school, the social workers, the Brookline Mental Health, the BEST team we work with. We're always looking for new programs. In particular with the teen dating violence, we find that if there's 2 members at our school, one has a restraining order on the perpetrator, that the counseling for both is really important. So we refer them to educational sessions with a social worker at the high school. And I meet oftentimes with the victims in the case, just to provide resources, prevention. We work with families. We assist people if it does end up going to court, with an action plan that we can present to the judge, so that we're not going before the judge with a blank piece of paper. We make sure if they need resources or if a bed is available, we put a packet together to present to the judge so that she has an idea of what's going on, and we can deal with immediate crisis as soon as possible. I think the team is incredible with the juvenile officers, the Brookline Court. It's confidential, but we meet in the best interest of the child and provide the resources that I am proud to say that I still work in Brookline because it's easy, because there's people there at my fingertips that I can call at 10 o'clock at night and say, okay, we have a situation. Sergeant Thornton is an active participant that I can call any time of day, Detective McDonald, Jen Pastor, Casey Hatchett, and the list goes on. So I think I have 30 seconds left. So I hope that if there's more information that you need or anything that can help paint the picture of how the community works so well together, we would be more than happy to provide that for you.
Thank you. Why don't we take a few questions if anyone has them? I guess
I have a
what you should
question.
do. Okay, Ron.
Hi, it sounds like you're doing really great work, and I respect what you're doing. But I do want to ask a question that I think is very, very important because I know it's of concern of many people of color around the country, and that is there a disparity between who gets the opportunity to participate in a diversion program that may be even unintentionally different for juveniles of color versus white juveniles? And I don't know if you have any statistics on that, but it's just something that I know that people will have a concern about.
That's a very good question. The diversionary program works across the board. We look at the incidents, what's available, and refer to the programs that are available for all students. It's something that we do, that we feel that prevention is key. And if we can provide services to the community, anybody that's referred or anybody that's in any type of crisis situation, we treat it the same and we offer the resources to all students. It's across the board. I can say in the 20 years, I've worked with everybody. I can't even think of numbers. I'm sorry?
Are there any statistics that we could look to sort of confirm that?
We only have
I'd have to dig deeper because you'd have to go by, I do have a list here of, from basically, 75 different crimes. So you'd have to look at each crime individually by race. But I think if you took the general ones, we could, and I do, I make sure we took a look. And the school is definitely always asking and making sure that that's one of their concerns as well, is making sure we're treating everybody fairly, and everybody's getting the same resources, everybody's getting the same chance. Right. So it's definitely a concern, but I will work on, I'll take a look at the stats, but it is difficult with the 75 different crimes. So in order to get a good look at something exact, it might be difficult, but we can get something.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I understand Raj has his hand up.
Yes. First of all, let me say that the work being done by folks here, wonderful. But I have a question I asked respectfully, that in what way can this work help reform the police, which is the charter of this, which is the assignment of this committee? Please don't misunderstand me. What you're doing is wonderful. So that's not the point. But my question is, how does this relate to, and maybe Bernard wants to answer that. But,
well, I mean, I think Ron raised the way in which it relates. I mean, if there are disparities in terms of how white kids are treated versus kids of color, then this committee would want to come up with some ideas as to how to address that. I mean, for example, in a school context, which I know from being on a school board, many times Black kids are treated differently than white kids because of the way they present themselves. They feel pressured, stressed, traumatized in some cases, and present themselves in a way that's different from a kid coming from a stable background where the world is their oyster. So I mean, there may be issues like that we need to deal with. Addressing how police view kids who may just come to them with an attitude, and help them try to understand. So I mean, that's a reform. That's one reform that I think Ron raised or suggested that we could be thinking of. So any other questions? Okay, can we just, I see Paul and Elizabeth. Can we just get those two and then let's move on? Oh, Marty wants. Okay, so we're gonna be running late here. Paul, you go.
Just a follow-up. So this is obviously the town or the police department is exercising its discretion. I think some of the panelists are probing that, how's that discretion used and whatnot is used towards a disadvantage of some particular group. So my question is, are there written criteria for the exercise of this diversion program? So say if so-and-so fits within this criteria, then they're referred to the criteria, to the diversion program. And then I think everybody on this panel would probably have some confidence that all the decisions are made in a non-discriminatory way and not towards a disadvantage on any particular group. So the question is there a written criteria?
So I can answer quick. There is, it's a basic criteria. It's not really complicated, but it's under the age of 21. So it's not just kids under the age of 18. It's not technically juveniles that lives or works in Brookline. It's the first offense and only offense, and it's not a crime of violence. And those are the criteria we have written down. But even then, there's always, I find in police work, there's always a what if situation where you might want to divert someone, whether it's a second offense or whether it is if it's a fight or a kid may not have started the fight, but it's a second offense. So you do have to take a lot of this on a case by case basis, but that's the criteria we have. And the state law has a similar criteria with the days office and their diversionary programs.
Would there be would another factor be whether the kid is, say, it doesn't really live or work in Brookline, but is in the Medco program and comes to Brookline for that reason? How would that factor in? Just kind of curious.
They're students at Brookline High School, so that would not be a factor. That's they're students. So we do, we might get kids that don't go to school in Brookline, don't live in Brookline, but commit a crime in Brookline, and those are also kids. We find that with graffiti often. And sometimes larcenies where we would divert them. That would be with us. That wouldn't involve the school. So that would be the case. But Medco kids are students.
Okay, let's keep to the, and others don't jump in, Ron. So Elizabeth, right? And remember our time.
Yes, very quickly. I just want to respond. I thought Raj's question was good, but I wondered if Doreen or Chuck could speak about the value of the roundtable approach to solving these comprehensive social problems early on in crime. And I was thinking about ways that might be broadened or used, or I know it's also used in domestic violence cases, I think, but mental illness cases. I just wondered if you wanted to say a word about that more as a systemic approach to policing reform and the opportunities for roundtable work to solve for problems.
Well, the roundtable works because it's members from all different facets of the community and looking at any incident that may come our way. Mental health issues arise with this team. We can sit down and really figure out what each individual juvenile may need, whatever the subject may be. And because of all the people on the team, they all come to the table with different experience. And from that, we're not working in a bubble. We're working as a community so that we're looking at, okay, this child may need something different than another child. This person might be a victim of teen dating violence versus somebody who has issues with substance abuse or mental health issues or suicide, whatever it may be. We have I want to say almost an answer for anything that comes our way because of the seasoned people on this group. And that's why we don't work in a bubble. And this committee really helps us to really take a look at all different ways to help a child, right, whoever that child may be.
Can I just jump in before Marty and ask, and you can just give us this information later if you don't have it. Does a roundtable include Black professionals as well as white professionals? And okay, so yes. I think the committee would be interested in knowing, the diversity of the roundtable, just as a factual matter. Marty.
All right, I've got a few things. I'll try to be very quick, and some of them are very quick.
Why don't we do one?
No, I'm sorry, but this is a big topic. And my first question is, do we have a subcommittee that's looking at this?
Yeah, is it the outreach, youth and outreach?
All right, well, that's good. I'm happy to hear that. So second question is, do the roundtables include someone that's a criminal defense lawyer?
No.
Okay.
Are you volunteering?
Not yet, but no, in fact, no. But I do think that that should be looked at. Number three is, I see something in one of the documents about being on school property when necessary. That's a very controversial issue. How is that playing out? From what I hear, there's an office in the high school.
I'm going to say
Well,
a case by
that's the
case.
SRO office.
Yeah. When a kid's supposed to be in school, you mean? Is that
No,
what it said?
is there an officer situated in the high school?
There is,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a school resource officer.
And is that mandatory under state law?
No, it's not.
It is.
It's not mandatory to be in the high school, though.
No, that's correct, yeah.
All right,
They're-
well,
they're-
anyway, I'll keep going because I know we're under time, but I think that's an issue that needs to be looked at. I know the task force is also, the reimagining people are interested in that. Now, second to last question is, I see something about preventing use of alcohol and drugs. Is that at all related to the old DARE program?
It's part of what we call the AWARE program now. But we also have a department within the high school, the Substance Abuse and Violence Prevention Program, which consists of a coordinator and social work. They're both social workers. And they work with the juvenile once they're referred, either by the family, the police, the school, sometimes through friends or self-referral, that they go through an assessment, and then a period is determined of how many weeks they meet with this counselor.
Is that what Mary Minor, she involved?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. And lastly, the diversion question by Paul was a very good one in terms of criteria. And I do see something about serious/violent crime, which puzzles me as a lawyer. What's serious/violent is? Does that mean serious and violent, or serious or violent? But the question is this: among other things, it lists robbery, which, as former Judge E knows, could include a purse snatch or level of violence, even a threat. Give me your wallet or I'll, punch you. I don't consider that.
Okay.
It's violent technically under the law. So how does that get played out in terms of how it's enforced? Is there a check and balance on whether that's a discretionary, an accurate discretionary decision? Does it get discussed with a senior
Okay, Jen?
higher officer?
Okay, Jen, you want to answer that?
Yeah, so we do have criteria set out that just takes into consideration, nothing really except for the crime in order to refer to the crimes that will be referred to the juvenile court involve. And I think it was mentioned actually by Sergeant Thornton. I just want to make sure that we know, in order to be considered for the diversion program, the student has to agree to that. We can't impose it on them, or that defeats the whole purpose, right? So it's important to know that the student must agree to do this, and that involves the parent as well. And we get the parent on board to help design what the contract is going to look like. I know he talked about that, but in terms of offenses, we really we try to reserve the juvenile court for acts that involve dangerous weapons, any gang-related activity, aggravated assaults and batteries. So not a fight, not a simple, duking it out in the hallway, but serious assault and aggravated assault and batteries. If a child or a student is already on parole, or they have open cases, that gets referred to juvenile court, or any, we said just once it's past the first offense, especially criminal acts within that 12-month period that are back to back, those we'll bump it up to the juvenile court.
Okay, and this sounds like
Okay, wait, Marty, we really need to go move on.
I'd just like to remind everyone, I'd like my retired Judge Blitzman, who writes about this all the time, to come talk to both committees, because he's...
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you. And could you put together, the answers to the questions we asked? I mean, we asked you to, provide us information on like the statistics and other stuff. I think it's very important that we just have the facts of what you're doing, so that we can go from there. Great. Thank you. Much appreciated. I apologize for the rush, but we do have town meeting breathing down our necks.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, next item is discussion of the chair's guidance on committee processes.
Right, are we doing minutes?
We already did minutes. You have some comments. Why don't you give them to Devin, and we'll incorporate them.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
Marty, if you could send them to me in an email, that would be great.
Yeah, I think I had one.
Okay. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to find it. Does anyone have any thoughts or critiques or ideas on the document that I circulated? I mean, you can say whatever you want about it. You know, say it's totally off the wall, but I just wanted to get the discussion going. No? Okay, let's move on. Discuss recommendations from subcommittees. So a number of subcommittees have come up with some recommendations, and I think we want to just discuss them at this point. And you know, we really have to discuss when we put them in a form of a written recommendation to the select board. Let's start off by identifying what they are. I know this, the first thing on the agenda here is proposals to make revisions to the policies and procedures manual. Do you want to start off with that, Michael?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, the first one, the interest in cannabis stores is not, I mean, it is very much a patch. It is not anything that I think should even be remotely controversial. But basically there is the procedures already prohibit police officers, Brookline police officers, from holding interest in, i.e. like being investors in alcohol stores that are regulated by the Brookline Police Department, and says they can't subsequently be employed by those stores. And I just think, given that we now also have cannabis stores that are regulated by the police department, the same issues with conflicts of interest apply. We don't really want the police lieutenant charged with inspecting the dispensaries to quit and become the securities head for a dispensary, or have an investment in a cannabis dispensary that they're charged with overseeing. So it's a one-word addition,
Right.
but it seems like something we should just do.
Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, and I don't mean to be picking on you, Marty, but Marty is responsible for requiring that changes or amendments to the policies and procedures go through the select board. That's not his proposal, but also that there be a hearing. So before I mean, this is something that should be sort of done by email to the chief, but I think what we have to do is put together this as well as other recommendations, so that we have more than just one little word change.
Literally one word addition.
Yeah. So what's the other is the social media policy.
Yeah.
Who was working on that? Yeah.
I mean, I had raised the issue, but my impression was that the police department was also looking into this. I spoke with Dan by email about it. Basically, you know, maybe Dan wants to speak on it.
Right.
I did speak with the department. They have drafted up a change in the policy. It's a new policy that deals with social media. It includes officers using their personal emails. But I haven't spent a lot of time on it. I'd like to be able to do that before it gets circulated. I have talked to the chief about it. And it's good, but I think we might have to tighten up a few things. So
right. Okay.
It's in progress.
Yeah, I think that's significant enough that that by itself, plus the one word change that Michael suggested, could be put together for the select board to act on.
Yeah. Yeah. And the context, of course, is that came up at this last meeting, that there was a kind of prominent public statement by an employee of the police department that caused some controversy. And, you know, this is also just something a lot of other departments have to deal with, issues like, you know, in Springfield, Springfield, Massachusetts, as a police officer apparently posted on social media that like he was happy a protester in Charlottesville was killed, as in like a really
Yeah.
bad person drove a car into that. Like we don't want, we should codify that it's not okay to say stuff like that on social media. So I think I'm glad the department is also looking at this, and I hope that we can play a role.
Okay, so Michael, can you and Dan sort of pull that together?
That's fine. Yeah, I'm just waiting to hear because they are already working on it, so I didn't want to duplicate.
Yeah.
Marty's hand.
Yeah, Marty.
Bernard's trying to ignore me.
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to wait until we have time to go for.
If I were your shoes, I would as well. I just want to get back to what Bernard said about public hearings and what I will add to that, piecemeal reforms. I've said this before, I abstained on the chokehold ban, even though I 100% agree with it, because for two reasons. I think it's important that we try to integrate everything together into a comprehensive document for the police manual, and that some things relate to others. Second, including the chokehold relates to other use of force things. Secondly, what Bernard is alluding to is the 1987 report adopted unanimously by the Board of Selectmen that police policy issues, which are the domain of the select board in consultation with the chief, should be subjected to public hearings. And that's another reason why I'd prefer to have everything in a comprehensive document that could be one public hearing for people to pick apart various things that they're interested in rather than do things one by one. So I'll keep saying that on everything that gets voted at this committee, that it should wait for a comprehensive reform.
Yeah, Marty, I think that's a very valid point, but there are a lot of little things that we're coming up with that it seems to me to be kind of a waste to wait until we have a big pile of stuff to process through the select board. I'd like to make changes or reforms that come up that are fairly discreet and that can be dealt with quickly, by the select board.
Just
I agree with you.
Say quickly, I think.
Well, I mean, quickly meaning, no, I don't mean quickly. That's the wrong use of wrong word.
Well, it would be more efficient for the board, I believe, to get a comprehensive document, have one public hearing. In fact, there would probably be less attention on individual items in the context of a comprehensive document than there would be if individual items are being on the select board agenda separately. You could have people
why don't we give some thought to at what point do we have enough to present to the select board to be able to do that?
Okay.
I don't have an answer to that question, but I think that it's a valid point. Okay, what about?
Yeah, question.
Yeah,
just in adding to your remarks you just made, are there some items that could be done by a simple vote of the select board and others that would require a hearing, or would they all require a hearing?
Well, I think well, Marty, you interpret your what was it? Was a warrant article or?
No. The problem is it's not binding. It was a 1987 report called Police and Community Relations. It was based on widespread concern about racial profiling, and that's when it all started. But the point is, it was adopted as recommendations by the select board at the time unanimously. But I would like to see that. I'll alert you right now to see that issue put into the police manual, so it'll be someplace where it'll be more permanent. It's kind of been lost in the shuffle, and Bernard knows that I've been raising it repeatedly on things like the civilian complaint process, where they've had public hearings, but they've been a little, shall we say, confused.
Okay, so how do we go forward with this?
Well, that I will propose adding something to the police manual about how policy gets formulated. I think the police manual is weak on the role of the select board.
Okay, why don't you put that together, and and other things, and the committee should discuss it
Right.
before we go forward with it, and we can, maybe that along with the social media and the cannabis policies can be presented to the select board in one package. I just want to get things done so that we don't end up at the end of the process with a huge report that's going to take forever to finalize and get processed.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Bernard and disagree with Marty. I think there's no actual cost to doing things serially, and waiting and waiting and waiting until we have apparently solved everything is a recipe for inaction and getting nothing done. It's a perpetual source of disagreement between Marty and I, but I want to voice it.
Okay. And I'm looking for a sort of a middle ground here. If Marty can put together a bunch of policies that we can present to the select board on an interim basis, I mean, that would be, one way of dealing with it. Okay, let's move on. What about the police department's objectives and the town's financial plan? Marty, why don't you discuss that? That came from
this
you.
one has a very time-sensitive aspect, which is the opposite of what we were just talking about. And the reason is that we talked about this at the subcommittee level, and the subcommittee agreed to ask this committee to endorse what we're talking about. And there's a sample in the packet that got added today. I sent it out yesterday. I thought it would be in the packet of the pages from the financial plan. And neither Bernard nor I nor anyone in the subcommittee wants to discuss the specific trees or details, but the general idea is pretty simple, which is that the town administrator issues this plan. I believe it's January every year, and it is the beginning of the budget discussions that go on for 5 months, almost 6 months actually. And every department has this kind of a section with mission, objectives, accomplishments. And it started actually when I was on the select board, what was called management by objectives. So I looked at the one for the police department. I felt it was more internally sound than reflective of the role of the select board. And I thought it could be done better, especially to look at the kind of issues that both committees are talking about. And so I presented this to the accountability subcommittee, and they agreed that we will ask that to be done, not by us, but by the town administrator, the chief, maybe Bernard. And I know that Chief O'Leary talked to Chief Morgan about it, and they're willing to work on something like that with the town administrator.
Yeah,
I mean, if the committee, but it has to get started.
Yeah.
Get pushed by us today. Because
I don't think this is a big deal. It's really a question of, number one, expressing the committee's concern that the objectives be updated, right? To recognize, for example, that we have more than just medical dispensaries, but we have actual recreational marijuana. That's one example. But also, expressing the committee's concern that the objectives actually be tied to what you intend to do over the next fiscal year, so that the goals in the next fiscal year can reflect how far you've actually accomplished those objectives. I mean, it's not a problem just of the police department. I think many departments in the town, and you don't really think of objectives and accomplishments as sort of a continuum, but rather as sort of discrete things. So I think that criticism, whatever you want to call it, coming from the committee to the chief and town administrator is really all we need to do, and they can figure out how to do it, because I think it's fairly clear and straightforward. Does anyone object to that message being conveyed? No. Okay. Good. Okay. It is conveyed. I see Mr. Kleckner's here. Okay. Yes, Dan.
Just if I could reiterate a little bit there. Chief Morgan has made some changes in the copy that's going to be going to the town administrator, where some of the changes that Marty had spoken about are reflected in this updated version that's going to go back over to Mr. Kleckner's office at the end of this week, beginning of next week. So I think he was able to make most of the changes except the ones that were in fiscal 21 accomplishments, because we're halfway through that year now.
Yeah.
The other changes were made, and I think they reflect what Marty had wanted.
And by the way, I have a couple of suggestions. I mean, and they're just suggestions. I'll send them to you. And if other committee members have suggestions, send them also to Dan, and he can process them.
It would probably be better sooner than later, because I know the chief said next week they do.
Right. Okay. So Ron, I think you're you're presenting on improvements to citizen complaint accommodation feedback process.
Yeah. Okay, so there are a few things about this. First of all, one of the reasons why this came up originally is because it appears to be a lot easier for a citizen to suggest a commendation for positive police action than it is to file a complaint. So it kind of came up a bit in that context. And we were thinking that at the very least there should be an equal form for doing either one. So that was how the discussion began. But then we brought up the whole idea, but this is in the accountability subcommittee that we had this discussion. The whole idea of civilians being able to rate encounters with the police department. In some ways, the way one would rate an encounter with any public-facing kind of agency, whether it's commercial or governmental. And one common way of doing that these days, it's not the only way to do it and not the only way we would want to do it if we want to be comprehensive, but one of the ways of doing that these days are feedback forms that you might get in email or messaging that just says, how would you rate your encounter? I mean, I just got one from the counter I had at the bank yesterday. You get a pop-up form that says, how would you rate this? Was the person courteous? Did you get what you need? Were there any problems? That kind of a thing. So I was thinking that if one means of getting feedback about police interactions in Brookline is when there's a police interaction, to give the civilian an opportunity to give feedback. And so I actually came up with two very different versions of a feedback form as a kind of a prototype for discussion. What I'll call the long form I presented at the accountability committee subcommittee meeting on Monday, and that was purposely kind of an over the top 10 minutes to fill out kind of a form, which I just got pushed back on, although I meant it just as a way of saying what could be done. But then I also created a very simple 1 minute or less form that one could do in an iPhone on an iPhone that just pretty much says, okay, you had an encounter with the Brookline Police, how did it go? And they could respond to that. And so I can show that one more. And by the way, links to the prototype forms are in your packet, the packet that came today in the addendum to recommendations. But I'll show you the 1 minute form right now, if I may. Just give me a sec here.
And by the way, while you're doing that, I'd like committee members to give Ron any comments you have. And I think this is something that should be incorporated into the complaint form that this subcommittee is also working on, so that when we present the complaint form, we also include, these suggestions, because I think they really are integrally connected.
Okay, so
do you agree, Ron?
yeah. Okay, so let me just move this. Can people see my screen?
Well, actually, okay, yeah.
Yeah, okay, fine. Okay, so this is the minimalist form. So I'm going to okay, so this could be done on an iPhone or a tablet or a PC. So first, short form, when did this encounter happen? You just kind of put in, the date and a time. of when it began. Okay, where you could put anything you want there. But it could be an address or anything you want there. Describe what happened. Okay, I'll just say something like traffic stop. Okay, and then if you want to, you can put the name of up to 3 officers or other police personnel who were involved, and it could be first name, last name, or badge, because people typically will not have all 3 of those things, but any one of those 3 things is fine. So I can say, over here, this is just my web form that happens to put my name whenever it sees something like that. Okay, I'll put John Smith. And badge number might be 1, 2, 3, whatever. They're just making something up, but you can put in as many as you want there, or none of them. And then you may absolutely enter your contact information here. And in my case, it's a web form. I can fill in my thing, and this is not something you want to put here, but anyway. But okay, so we've got, I could put full contact information in, and then there's just basically, how would you rate this encounter with the Brookline Police? And if I put say neutral, it'll just be that, or very positive. If I put either very negative, if I put very negative, it will put in a link to a formal, an optional formal complaint form. If I put in very positive, it'll put in a link to an optional commendation form. So for example, if I put in very negative, and then I put in next, I don't really have a link to a complaint form here, but it's just, if you would like to file a formal complaint, you may do so here, and there would be a link to a complaint form, for example. And then, I can say, okay, and the next just says, thank you for filling this out. And that would be the survey. So as I said, it's a prototype. It's not completely smooth, but it gives you an idea of what could be done very, very easily. And there are lots of ways to distribute that information. The other form that I have, which I don't know if you want to see it now, but it's like a 10 minutes worth of very, very, very comprehensive information that goes into all kinds of things, which I have a feeling the people from the Accountability Committee would not like me to show now, because I took so much time doing it on Monday. But I would like you to take a look at it yourselves. You can just kind of click on the link in your packet, and it has lots of deep information. It gets everything from gender, language, sexual orientation, all kinds of stuff like that. Which one could use, and we would probably, if we were going to do anything, we would just use a subset of those things. But I just wanted to illustrate the kinds of things that kind of information you could get for something like this.
Yeah, I assume we can go with the short form, by the way. I had a dental appointment this morning, and they wanted me to fill out this form that was like 4 or 5 pages long.
So that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Again, people should look at these forms and give Ron, any comments, suggestions, and then we'll incorporate that into the process by which we submit revisions, proposed revisions to the complaint form or complaint process. Okay. Where are we? Subcommittee reports. Personnel structure and mission. Mr. Yee.
That's me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. We're working on our work plan. We have another meeting tomorrow. We're focusing on civil service as our first stab. And we're just doing our due diligence on that. Nothing to report other than that yet.
Yeah. And by the way, we also asked Michael Downey, who's here, to put together just basically a fact sheet on, what is a police commissioner. I mean, that's a phrase that's used a lot around town, and I think many times it's used incorrectly. So it would be useful to just give people an understanding of what we mean, what we don't mean by police commissioner. So he's working on that.
I am working on that, and I am here and here to acknowledge that as well. So
okay, great. Okay. Yeah, Marty. You're muted. Can't hear you, Marty.
I do it unmute. Even I can read that. So one comment and one question. Well, on the last one, for Michael's sake, there's a lot on police commissioner in the 1987 report and in the warrant article that I got passed on making police commissioner part of the select board bylaw. It had a lengthy explanation as usual by me. Getting back to the civil service issue, I'm still not clear. This was one of my questions in the minutes, but I'll ask it now. Whether the discipline issue can be handled separately from the hiring issue. In other words, could we remove ourselves from civil service for hiring? I'm sorry, for disciplinary reasons, as opposed, no, it would be the other way around. Can we remove ourselves for hiring to get more diversity, but stay in for discipline? And
I think, Mike,
looking at that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
Well,
this did. Yeah, this did. I mean, this did come up, at the last session. And my understanding is no, you withdraw it, and that's withdrawal is a withdrawal. But for in a way, we will remain at least partially in civil service because the officers that were hired prior to our withdrawal, or that were are employed prior to the withdrawal, they retain their civil service rights. So essentially, on the date, post withdrawal, if a police officer is disciplined and they were employed prior to the date of withdrawal, they would have the option to either go to arbitration, grievance and arbitration via the collective bargaining agreement, or they would have the option to go to the Civil Service Commission. But for officers hired after withdrawal, they would only have the option of going to grievance and arbitration, challenge discipline.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm less concerned about withdrawing for discipline.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned with withdrawing for hiring. And maybe you don't have an answer off the top of your head of whether we can withdraw for hiring but not discipline. And Mel seems to have the answer.
Yeah, Mel has
Yeah, you cannot. It's you belong to the civil service system or not. So, but what I was going to say is, in addition to what Michael said about grandfathering, it's likely that if we propose removal from civil service, that we'll have to develop a system how to deal with the benefits of civil service, which are, open and competitive. Making sure we have good qualified people, and probably on the disciplinary side, addressing it in some ways. So that's what I would have to say about that.
All right, one last quick comment. I'm more concerned with the hiring, and I'll let Elizabeth and her folks look at the ups and downsides and whether there's ways to increase diversity while staying in the civil service system. That's really my biggest priority.
Yeah, I mean that should be a topic that the subcommittee looks at, Elizabeth.
That's helpful, Marty. I will add that question specifically.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just before we move on, just quickly though, staying in the, so if you're saying if you're asking if we stay in the civil service system and to be able to kind of broaden the diversity for hiring, I think it's difficult. It makes it, staying in civil service makes that difficult. We've had that conversation. Chief O'Leary and I have had a conversation with another chief who's experienced kind of withdrawing from civil service, and his experience has been that it's been easy. It's been helpful in terms of broadening the pool of folks that you hire onto the force, and you're not limited by a formula like a 2n+1 formula of who you can consider, and you're not limited either to strictly people that are residents of the town a year prior to the exam. So I think that's the answer. It's hard to be flexible within the civil service system in hiring.
Michael Zurab, do you have a question? Oh, I'm sorry. It looked like your hand was up.
Bernard, one last quickie on this. Maybe, okay. Elizabeth, when you look at it, is it possible we could, through a home rule bill, get a little extra hiring power?
Yeah, we can, but we've tried that.
Well, maybe we should try it again. Times have changed, as some of you may have noticed.
That's a good point. Good point. So, another option. Okay, accountability subcommittee.
Yeah, so we already talked about a lot of things, but I wanted to add a couple more that we've been working on, but I wanted to add a couple other things. As Ron mentioned, we've been a bit concerned, I guess, with the, asymmetry between being able to file commendations through a web form on the website, but not complaints. And we took a little vote with some suggestions to the select board. Bernard, you of course know this already, but that's in the packet. Thanks to Devin for adding it, even though I didn't explicitly ask, but I will be sure to do that from now on. So it's page 30 of the PDF of the packet. And yeah, there's 3 recommendations. One is creating a web form similar to what's done in Boston. The second is providing information about the complaints process in languages other than English, which is something that the 2017 Naval Race Report was about, or mentioned rather. And then finally adding some information about the complaints process on the select boards and the select board's role in it on the select board's webpage. So not a discrete change that is not policy, but is, I think, a material improvement in the process. And then we also took a vote. We're still sort of deliberating about how best to think about this, but many members of the subcommittee feel that testimony from folks who filed complaints against the police department would be helpful to hear. And so we've been thinking about how to implement that, and we'll continue to think about that as you, pursuant to your guidance in this most recent document. But that's something we're thinking about. So I just wanted to mention.
By the way, one item on the agenda is discussion of future pre-meeting educational topics. If you want to, if the subcommittee wants to identify, who they want to present and make sure that they've vetted that person, we can put it on the next meeting.
Yeah,
and I'm not opposed to that. My concern is that, we the subcommittee vet people to make sure that we don't embarrass ourselves or the person.
Yeah, I think that space of time, and the sort of 15 minutes guidance for that space of time, I think that sounds like totally fine, and we can think about the details of doing it in a way that's responsible and useful.
All right, good.
I think that's it. Thank you. Maybe perhaps other folks on the subcommittee want to weigh in, but.
Okay. Civil rights, militarization, and mass events. Mr. Yee.
So we did meet and fleshed
by
out
the way, Paul, before we go forward, make sure that you ask for someone to volunteer on the committee, because we lost a member, Ms. Benny, and it's now just me and Paul. Maybe Paul has enough brain power for a subcommittee, but you need more brain power than me.
Right. I second that. That's a really good suggestion. So anybody who wants to join, you can ask Bernard, and we'll include you. Please join. So we fleshed out a work plan. So one of the topics that people had talked about in this particular session was diversion. That's a topic within the subcommittee. It was arrest and diversion. We can look into that and see how the police make decisions about arresting, summoning people, and then making a recommendation for diversion. When I was a judge, as I sat, I was always amazed when all of a sudden at arraignment, the police officer, the prosecutor, was just jump up in court and say, Judge, you don't need to handle this case. We're diverting this case, and you don't need to arraign this person. And there's no reason that's provided to the public or to the judge, and the person may be diverted or may not be diverted. And I never knew what the criteria was. But obviously it's the prosecution's prerogative to not prosecute somebody and to divert somebody. So it seems to me, I think as to monitor this, that Ron has brought up is, whether or not Black and brown people are being adversely impacted. We should look at that and see how those discretionary decisions are made by our town's police department. So we fleshed out the work plan on racial profiling, no-knock warrants, the impact of special response teams and crowd control and mutual aid agreements and campus police in Brookline, how they're being supervised or looked at. Some topics that we discussed that we may not be able to handle are racism and bias in personnel structure. We're going to recommend that go over to the personnel committee if the personnel committee is willing to do that.
Paul, I thought we agreed that would be something that we would keep.
Oh, I thought we were going to send it to personnel.
Yeah, I suggested that initially, but I think that was
okay.
a dumb idea.
All right, so we still have it.
Okay.
Elizabeth, you're very lucky.
Okay. I mean, yeah, there's overlap on all these things. So Elizabeth.
Okay. So it's still within our bailiwick then. And with respect to houses of worship and how the Brookline Police Department provide protective services like to reproductive clinics and the like, what we were going to suggest is just to have a fact sheet. If the community outreach committee could do that, that would be helpful. And our next meeting is October 30th at 10 a.m.
Great. And I can report late breaking news. Casey Hatchett has agreed to join the committee. So
great. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Not
you.
to that, but can I get some comments on what Paul just talked about?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. The issue of diversion is quite near and dear to my heart, and I'm very happy to hear what you're talking about, and also you brought it up earlier with the school people. And I do think criteria is a wonderful idea. I submitted to the legislature when I was on the Sentencing Commission for MACDL, the Criminal Defense Group, 3 diversion pieces of legislation that we don't have to go into them now, but one would have been to reinstate the Brandano process. Paul knows what I'm talking about. Second was to give civil infraction leeway to judges over the objection of the district attorney. And the third was to expand clerk's hearings for also minor felonies. So I'll send you that stuff. I do fully endorse what you're talking about criteria. And the question I would add, I think I asked it to the sergeant who was with us earlier, but not just criteria, but also how the decisions get made. Is it just the officer who has the option to A, arrest, and B, bring to court? Almost always when there's an arrest, as you know, and Chief O'Leary knows, it triggers a court complaint. And part of that is because a lot of police departments across the state are worried that they'll get sued if an arrest doesn't lead to being processed in court. I think that we could have procedures to put a check and balance in the middle there and see that some of those cases don't go to court and don't go on a Corey record. It's not until there's an arraignment that somebody gets a Corey record. And I have moved in a lot of cases for a dismissal before arraignment, and some DAs are better about it than others. So we can talk about this later, and I'll send you the 3 legislative proposals that I sent to the legislature in 2017. Like many of my ideas, they fell on deaf ears, but not in Brookline.
Yeah, good. Okay, great. Thank you, Marty. Okay, any other questions? Let's move on to community outreach, youth, non-traditional roles. And who is that?
That's me.
Casey.
So we did meet about a week and a half ago and set out what kind of our focus area would be going forward. We focused a lot of discussion actually around the homelessness situation in Brookline, crisis intervention, our school resource officers, our walk and talk program, looking at emergency management, our CERT program, our security trainings for houses of worship, and the juvenile justice and juvenile unit, which we just heard from. We are going to meet on Friday morning at 10 a.m. So I can announce that Caitlin Keneally, our school resource officer at Brookline High School, is going to be attending that meeting. And she'll talk a bit about the work that she's doing. And I shared the SRO fact sheet with our subcommittee, which is also in our packet for this week and from our last meeting. And the walk and talk fact sheet as well. And so we'll talk a bit about the walk and talk program. I'll update our subcommittee on where we are with the survey, which is we're in the process of getting everything printed. We needed to have envelopes printed because town hall apparently was in very short supply. I asked for 2,000 envelopes and I was told there's about 20. So we had some printed and we'll be stuffing those and getting the surveys in the mail, hopefully early to middle of next week. And then what else do we have? Yep, so we'll hear from our SRO. We're also going to have Lieutenant Pastor and Annabelle Lane come and talk about crisis intervention and the work that they do. I wasn't sure if Lieutenant Pastor was going to be speaking to that tonight, so I didn't book her for Friday morning at our meeting, but I'll put her on the agenda for our next meeting, certainly.
Great, thank you. Hey, can I just make a comment? I think, you know, what this subcommittee is doing is very, very important, and Casey's working very hard. But I'd like committee members to articulate their issues with the SRO program and the walk and talk program, so that, you know, we really have a sense of what things, you know, people are concerned about, and to the extent that, you know, we can address them, or, you know, Casey, you can address them. I mean, we can sort of put them to the side. To the extent that, you know, that they represent ongoing problems, we can look at how to fix them. But, you know, there's a lot of talk around town about, you know, SROs. They think that they're in school arresting kids left and right and doing all, you know, a bunch of other things. So, you know, if people think that there are things that the SRO are doing that they shouldn't be doing, let us know. You know, I just don't want to let that, you know, be under, you know, an underground feeling. Without you know, us really addressing it head on. Okay, any questions? Okay, we're making very good time with town meeting breathing down our necks. Dan.
I just asked one question. Tomorrow I'm going to be talking to Ben Vivanti, who runs the IT and the website for the police department. I know I've heard it on a number of occasions about people having trouble complaining about somebody, but not about giving accommodation. And I just would like some direction as to where they're getting that. Because I go on the website and you just hit on services and information, and right, the first two things that pops up is how to file a complaint and how to file accommodation. And if it's because of
So the issue is that commendations is a form that is directly on the website, and you type the info into the website and hit submit, and you file the commendation. And then with complaints, the page has 5 different documents, and you're supposed to download one of the documents, print it out, complete it, and mail it back or hand deliver it in person. And, you know, in other, like, for example, in Boston, filing a complaint is done in a similar way, or can be done in a similar way as we can do commendations here, which is that you can file the info directly through the website and hit submit. It's, I mean, that's what we're talking about. It's that the process of filing.
Well, okay, I think just so you understand, part of what I'm looking at is that they would be able to file that complaint electronically.
Yeah.
The whole complaint process that's on there has been put on there for a reason, and it was a citizen committee that put that all together, and that's all on there. So
it wasn't. Our suggestions weren't perfect, and some of them were time limit or time specific, meaning that many of the technologies we have today, I don't think we may have had back then. I mean, for example, the easy fix is just to create a fillable form for the complaint.
Yeah, and that's what I've been trying to get done for like 2 months.
Okay.
But it's not. Yeah, it seems like it should be simple.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. So keep pushing. I think that's something that doesn't need select board action. I mean, you're not changing the complaint form. It's just making it into a fillable form.
Right.
We may change it later on when Marty's Marty's thing is finalized. But
I will be talking about that with Ben tomorrow.
Okay. Casey, do you have something to add?
At first, I thought the issue is that when we renovated our website, the form, the link wasn't as readily apparent. So I think early on that was a concern as well. We transitioned this summer to a new website, and now both of those are co-located on the same page. And so at least it's easier to find, although it is still a paper document that could transition to a fillable form, certainly.
Yeah. And then this is I think I said this to Dan, but I thought it was really funny. So I filled out a police commendations form, I don't know, 7 or 10 days ago. And when I clicked submit, it told me that something like, we've received your traffic ticket appeal, and someone so that's probably not the intended message.
I think we were able to correct that, but if you want to go ahead and send in a commendation, with my name on it, I won't complain. And let me know if you get the same return.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously not a like a real issue, but I thought it was funny. So
yeah, the website, I will say, is a work in progress. I have 2 members of my staff that have been working on that. Ben Vivante did the major shift over to the new site that we did, but it's, we just did some reorganization to put, we had community services and then programs, and I couldn't figure out why something was on one page versus the other. And so we, retitled some things and moved things together to try and make it easier to navigate. So I appreciate feedback, and anyone that, goes on the site, if you see something it doesn't make sense to you, please feel free to email me and we'll try to get that corrected.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, next is any suggestions for future pre-meeting educational topics, and we have one coming up from the accountability subcommittee. Let me know if you're not going to be ready by our next meeting, which is December 2nd. Mm-hmm. Also be aware that December 2nd is also another town meeting day. My guess is that we're going to be using that day because we have 40 warrant articles. And we've gotten up to number 2.
So we're going to meet on Monday, and if I feel that we're ready to have somebody come in December 2nd, I'll let you know then. Otherwise, I'll let you know otherwise.
Okay, good. And I guess an alternative is, if you're not ready, did you mention someone who you're suggesting?
Well,
speak to us,
I've suggested 2 people, frankly. One came up today in the context of the school stuff. It's I think Paul would know him, is just retired Judge Jay Blitzman. He was the chief juvenile judge up in Lowell, and he's been writing quite a bit, generally critical of school to police pipelines. But he's been writing in Commonwealth Magazine. You could easily Google his name and school.
How do you spell his name?
Blitzman.
Okay.
And he's a close friend. We were public defenders together years ago, and he's willing to do it. But one question is, I know the task force is talking about this a lot, including having someone in the school, and I wonder if I think some of these people who we're bringing in, which we haven't done that much, but we did it today, and should be joint sessions. But that's a separate question. The other one is Dan knows this, Jack McDevitt, who's a leading expert across the state. He's at Northeastern at some kind of racial justice program on racial profiling and police issues in general, including discipline. So I think that the committee you were on, Bernard, 2009, heard from him.
Yep.
And the third one is Howard Friedman, who sues cops for a living, and but he lives in Brookline, and he's quite, in my mind, quite reasonable in spite of the fact that he sues cops, or because of the fact. And he can talk a lot about not just disciplinary procedures and accountability, but also he gets an awful lot of calls about Brookline, and most of them he doesn't take as clients. But so he's heard a lot about the Brookline department and has some very clear-cut opinions. He's lived here for a long time.
That's it. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that.
I mean, one issue that Howard and Jack can talk about has been lurking in the background of the accountability committee. It hasn't come up for discussion, partly because especially Michael and I are focused on the existing procedures and improving them. And we've got some ideas that I think will improve them in a big way. At least another one that I got looking at that New York Times story that I circulated for this packet. And I haven't even told Michael about it yet. But lurking in the background of that is an 800-pound gorilla issue that nobody's bringing up. And frankly, I don't want to bring it up because I think it would be inappropriate for Brookline, which is a separate standalone civilian review board. And Jack and Howard have talked about it in the past and would again. But, you know, there's a lot of people talk about it on the task force, but they're not looking at anything concrete that I know of. And I think it would be good to hear from people that know about those issues statewide and nationwide to discuss whether there's something we should be looking at in Brookline.
Okay. Yeah. I thought the committee was also talking about something that Perf wrote an article on. That's a Perf, police executive, is that PER? Review Research Foundation. I can never get that. Which is, I guess you'd call it sort of a progressive policing think tank type organization. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes.
Okay, so they talk about that in terms of you know, alternative, let's see, independent sort of ombudsman type positions as an alternative to civilian review boards, which, you know, I agree with you, are very problematic. Matter of fact, I lived in Philadelphia, which had a civilian review board since 1957, and it was useless. But you know, they're discussing the idea of just an independent person who can either take complaints or work with complainants separate from the police department. So
yeah, this is something I've wondered about a lot. Actually, is, you know, we have our complaints process is done through an internal affairs officer under the police department, and I don't know whether or how, like, the logistics of this, but like whether it would make any sense to have that person instead housed within the select board in terms of budget, and also maybe report to the town administrator instead of the police chief, and then be an independent ombudsman type position. I mean, I'm just sort of spitballing, but it's something that's come up a lot because I think, you know, from hearing from complainants, their gut reaction is always like, well, there's no way this person who is a police officer is going to investigate this complaint fairly. And so, you know, one way to address that concern would be to have an independent monitor. So this is something, I mean, I don't know enough about it, but it seems like a reasonable idea to think about.
No, I think the subcommittee ought to investigate that. It's not going to, I mean, people are still going to say that it's not, that the person's not independent, right? Because they work for the town. So it's not going to be a panacea for all these issues. But
Bernard, we could add that if you'd like to our our topic of governance, and that we're going to start hearing from Michael Downey about the commissioners. We could actually add that as a question mark in the governance structure, if you'd like, in the how to assist the governance structure.
Okay. Okay, I thought the accountability committee was actually working on that. Is that not true?
No, we definitely are. I don't see any reason why you couldn't also.
Okay, we'll both do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
all right, great. Okay, I'll put that on in our work plan. Yeah.
Okay, and communicate.
I I have another idea that I haven't yet talked to Michael about, but we've already started talking about the first idea about what I will call a, not a hybrid model, but adding more non-police involvement, possibly by the administrator, Lloyd Gelano, to be involved a little more, not as an advocate and not as a decision maker, but involved in the process, partly as a hand holder for complainants to make sure they know what's going on. So I do think there's ways we can improve the current process and give it more accessibility for complainants, and also have another set of eyes on the process as it goes along without changing the fundamental nature of what we adopted in 1987, which is internal review and an appeal option to the select board.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, great. Anything else? 6:35, 25 minutes to town meeting. Town meeting is 7, right? Not 7:30?
should be 6, but it's, yeah, it's 7:30.
Okay, good. Okay, I got to prepare for that one. Thank you, everyone. And we'll meet again in December.
Thank you.
Until we meet again.